At 02:30 hours on October 25, 1944, Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Kane stood on the bridge of USS Tang in the Taiwan Strait, watching the wake of his final torpedo curve back toward his submarine. The torpedo had launched 20 seconds ago. It should have been heading straight for the Japanese transport ahead. Instead, it was turning left, making a wide circle through the dark water. Its phosphorescent wake was clearly visible against the Black Sea, and it was coming straight for Tang. O'Kane had 15 seconds to react. Maybe 20. He'd just fired the 24th and final torpedo of Tang's 5th war patrol. In 5 days of continuous combat, his submarine had sunk more Japanese tonnage than most boats managed in their entire war careers. But now that last torpedo was malfunctioning. It was running in a circle, and there was nothing O'Kane could do to stop it. O'Kane shouted orders. Emergency flank speed. Hard right. Rudder. Tang's engines roared. The submarine began to accelerate. O'Kane was trying to outrun his own weapon, but Tang was already at attack speed. The acceleration wasn't fast enough. Through his binoculars, O'Kane watched the torpedo close the distance. He could see the wake getting closer. He could judge the angle. He knew with absolute certainty that it would hit. His crew had performed perfectly. His tactics had worked. His training had paid off. But one equipment failure, one torpedo malfunction, was about to destroy the most successful submarine in United States Navy history. Richard O'Kane was 33 years old, born February 2, 1911 in Dover, New Hampshire. He'd graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1934. He started his career on surface ships, heavy cruiser Chester, destroyer Pruitt. But in 1938, he went to submarine school in New London, Connecticut. That decision changed everything. O'Kane found submarines were his calling. He understood them instinctively, how they moved, how they fought, what they could do. He spent 4 years on USS Argonaut, learning the trade. Then in early 1942, he joined the pre-commissioning crew of a new submarine, Wahoo. As executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Marvin Kennedy commanded Wahoo's first 2 patrols. They were frustrating. Torpedoes missed. Opportunities were wasted. Kennedy was cautious. He followed doctrine to the letter. Wahoo returned from those patrols with minimal results. Then Dudley Morton took command on December 31, 1942. Morton was different from any submarine commander O'Kane had met. Morton was aggressive. He believed submarines were offensive weapons meant to sink ships, not hide. Before Wahoo's 3rd patrol, Morton gave the crew a speech that became legendary. "Wahoo is expendable," he told them. "We will take every reasonable precaution, but our mission is to sink enemy shipping. If anyone doesn't want to go along under these conditions, see the yeoman. I'm giving him authority now to transfer anyone who is not a volunteer. Nothing will ever be said about your remaining in port. Not one man asked to leave." Morton's first innovation came before they even left port. He approached O'Kane with a radical proposal. Morton wanted to reverse the traditional command structure during attacks. Instead of the captain manning the periscope, Morton wanted O'Kane to handle all periscope observations. Morton would run the plot, maintain situational awareness, and con the submarine. O'Kane would be the eyes. Morton would be the brain. It was unprecedented. No submarine captain gave up control of the periscope. But Morton understood something others didn't. By giving the periscope to O'Kane, Morton could maintain complete awareness of the entire tactical situation. He could track multiple targets, monitor escort positions, calculate firing solutions, plan escape routes, all while O'Kane provided real-time observations. Morton explained it simply, "Now you're going to be my co-approach officer, not my assistant. You'll make all the approach and attack periscope observations. I'll con Wahoo to the best attack position, and then you'll fire the torpedoes." Morton paused. His serious expression changed to his usual engaging smile. He added, "This way I'll never get scared." O'Kane understood immediately. Morton trusted him completely. It was a responsibility beyond anything O'Kane had experienced. He replied simply, "I appreciate your confidence, Captain." That partnership transformed submarine warfare. On Wahoo's third patrol in January 1943, they put the new system to work. The patrol area was Wewak Harbour in New Guinea, a major Japanese staging base. The mission was reconnaissance. Just look around and report back. Morton had other ideas. On January 24, he took Wahoo straight into the harbour, submerged. It was insane. Going into a hostile harbour underwater meant potential for getting trapped in nets or shallow water with no escape route. But Morton believed surprise was worth the risk. They found Japanese destroyer Harusame at anchor. Destroyers were built specifically to kill submarines. They had depth charges. Sonar. Speed. Attacking one was suicide, according to standard doctrine. Morton ordered the attack anyway. O'Kane manned the periscope. He called out ranges and bearings. Morton conned Wahoo into position. They fired 6 torpedoes. The first 5 missed or malfunctioned. The 6th hit Harusame amidships. The destroyer broke in 2 and sank in minutes. Morton reversed course and took Wahoo out of the harbour at full speed. No depth charges. No pursuit. The Japanese were too surprised to react. It was the first time an American submarine had penetrated a defended harbour, sunk a warship, and escaped successfully. 2 days later, Wahoo encountered a convoy. 3 freighters, a tanker, and troop transport Buyo-Maru. Multiple escorts. Morton attacked aggressively, constantly adjusting position. O'Kane called the shots. They sank the tanker first, then a freighter, then Buyo-Maru. The transport was loaded with Japanese soldiers. When it sank, hundreds ended up in the water in lifeboats and rafts. Morton made a controversial decision. He ordered Wahoo to surface and man the deck guns. His reasoning was tactical. Any Japanese soldier who made it to shore would eventually return to combat and kill Americans. Morton wanted to eliminate that threat. Wahoo opened fire. It was brutal and violated traditional warfare ethics, but Morton viewed it as practical. The action became controversial after the war. The truth was that war in the Pacific was savage on both sides. Wahoo returned from that third patrol with extraordinary results. 8 ships confirmed sunk. It was unprecedented. Morton and O'Kane were heroes. Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of Submarines Pacific, called Wahoo the finest submarine he'd ever known. Morton was the perfect aggressive commander. O'Kane was the perfect executive officer. Together they were unstoppable. O'Kane served on 4 more patrols with Morton. Each one was successful. Wahoo's tactics became legendary throughout the submarine force. Other boats tried to copy them. But the difference was the partnership between Morton and O'Kane. They trusted each other completely. They communicated effortlessly. They thought alike. When Morton saw a tactical opportunity, O'Kane was already positioning for it. When O'Kane called an observation, Morton was already planning the response. It was perfect synchronization, but Morton pushed too hard. On Wahoo's 7th patrol in October 1943, he took the submarine into the Sea of Japan through La Perouse Strait. It was one of the most dangerous areas in the Pacific, heavily mined, constant Japanese patrols, shallow waters. Morton sank 4 ships before attempting to exit through the same strait. Wahoo was detected. Japanese patrol aircraft found her on the surface and attacked with depth charges. Wahoo went down with all hands. 79 men died, Morton among them. O'Kane had been transferred off Wahoo before that patrol. He was in California overseeing construction of Tang. When he learned about Wahoo's loss, he was devastated. Morton had been his mentor, his friend. The man who'd taught him everything about submarine warfare. Now Morton was gone. O'Kane was about to take command of his own submarine. He made himself a promise. He would fight the way Morton had taught him. He would sink more ships than Wahoo. He would make Morton proud. When O'Kane commissioned Tang on October 15, 1943, he was determined to apply everything Morton had taught him. But he would go further. Morton had revolutionized how a captain and executive officer worked together. O'Kane would revolutionize how an entire crew operated. He started with training. Relentless, exhausting, continuous training. Every officer, every enlisted man, everyone who touched the fire control system, everyone who worked in the torpedo rooms, everyone who stood watch. They all trained constantly. O'Kane focused obsessively on one specific skill: periscope work, speed and accuracy at the periscope. Most submarine commanders made quick periscope observations. Raise the scope. Look around. Lower it fast before anyone spotted it. Standard doctrine emphasized caution. Minimize periscope exposure. Don't give the enemy a chance to see you. O'Kane believed the opposite. He wanted his officers comfortable at the periscope, confident, fast, accurate. He wanted them able to recognize ship types instantly, estimate ranges by eye, calculate angles on the bow without instruments, judge speeds from visual observations alone. He drilled them daily, hour after hour. He'd call officers to the conning tower, show them silhouettes of Japanese ships, tankers, freighters, destroyers, escorts. How fast can you identify them? What's the tonnage? What's the probable speed? What's the angle? The officers learned to process information instantly. No hesitation. No uncertainty. O'Kane demanded perfection. If an officer couldn't identify a ship type in 3 seconds, they drilled until they could. If range estimates were off by more than 200 yards, they practiced until they were consistently accurate. O'Kane also trained his crew on night surface attacks. This was his specialty, the tactic he'd learned from Morton and perfected on his own. Most submarine commanders preferred submerged attacks, safer, more controlled. The submarine was harder to spot underwater, but submerged attacks were slower, limited visibility through the periscope, restricted speed, difficult maneuvering. O'Kane believed surface attacks at night gave overwhelming advantages: full speed, better visibility, rapid maneuvers, the ability to charge straight into convoys and create chaos. But night surface attacks required perfect coordination. Everyone had to know their job, execute without thinking, react to changing situations instantly. O'Kane drilled his crew until they could conduct a complete surface attack with minimal communication. The radar operator called out contacts and ranges. The tracking party in the conning tower plotted positions and generated firing solutions. The torpedo room stood ready to fire on command. The engine room provided maximum power on demand. The diving officer prepared for emergency submergence if needed. Everyone worked together seamlessly. Tang's first patrol in January 1944 tested everything O'Kane had built. The patrol area was the Caroline and Mariana Islands. Tang departed Pearl Harbor on January 22. O'Kane was nervous. This was his first patrol as commanding officer. Everything he'd trained for, everything Morton had taught him. It all came down to this. Would his methods work? Would his crew perform? Would Tang be successful? The answer came on February 17. Tang's radar picked up a convoy, 2 freighters, 5 smaller ships, multiple escorts. O'Kane brought Tang to the surface, positioned ahead of the convoy. Let them come to him. When the range closed to attack position, one of the escorts suddenly turned toward Tang, range 7,000 yards and closing fast. The escort had spotted them. O'Kane ordered emergency dive. Tang went deep fast. The escort dropped 5 depth charges. None were close. Tang was deeper than the escort expected. O'Kane waited. Let the escort move away, then brought Tang back to periscope depth. The convoy was still there. Still moving, still vulnerable. O'Kane set up the attack, called the bearings, calculated the solution, fired 4 torpedoes at the nearest freighter, range 1,500 yards. 3 torpedoes hit. Gyotan Maru, 6,800 tons, broke apart and sank by the stern. Tang dove deep again, cleared the area, came back up, tracked the convoy, attacked again at dawn. By the end of that first patrol, Tang had fired all 24 torpedoes. scored 16 hits, sunk 5 ships, total tonnage 18,000. O'Kane's training had worked. His crew had performed perfectly. Tang returned to Pearl Harbor as one of the most successful first patrols of the war. The second patrol was different. No combat, just lifeguard duty off truck. But it showed O'Kane's character. On April 30th, 1944, American carrier aircraft was striking truck heavily. Multiple aircraft were shot down. Pilots bailed out or ditched in the ocean around the atoll. Tang was positioned outside the lagoon to rescue any downed aviators. O'Kane received word that multiple pilots were in the water. He brought Tang to the surface despite heavy Japanese fire from shore batteries. He used his deck guns to suppress enemy positions, maneuvered Tang close to downed pilots. His crew pulled 22 men from the water. 22 pilots who would have died or been captured without Tang's intervention. But there was a problem. Tang wasn't designed to carry that many extra people. The submarine had a crew of 87. Now she had 109 men aboard. No extra bunks, no extra food, no extra anything. O'Kane made a decision. He ordered rations cut in half for everyone, including himself. He divided his own cabin among the rescued pilots, gave them his bunk, slept on the deck. Tang made the 3,500-mile trip back to Pearl Harbor on half rations. Everyone was hungry. Everyone was cramped. But all 22 pilots made it home safely. Admiral William Halsey personally thanked O'Kane and his crew. He awarded every Tang crewman the Navy Air Medal. Submariners wearing air medals became a running joke at reunions. Tang's third patrol was legendary. The patrol area was the Yellow and East China Seas, extremely dangerous waters, shallow, heavily mined, constant Japanese patrols. On June 24, southwest of Kagoshima, Tang encountered a massive convoy. 6 large ships guarded by 16 escorts. It was the most heavily defended convoy O'Kane had ever seen. Standard doctrine said to avoid such targets. Too much risk, too many escorts, find easier targets. O'Kane ignored that doctrine. He waited for darkness, then attacked on the surface. Charged straight into the middle of the formation. Tang fired her first spread of torpedoes at 2300 hours. 2 torpedoes at one ship, 2 at another, all 4 hit. Massive explosions lit up the night. O'Kane swung Tang through the convoy, fired again. 2 more hits, 2 more explosions. The convoy was in chaos, ships burning, escorts confused. Searchlights scanning randomly. Tang kept moving. O'Kane maintained control, called out bearings, adjusted course. Fired again. More hits, more explosions. When the smoke cleared at dawn, 4 ships were sinking. Post-war Japanese records confirmed it. Tamahoko, Maru, Tainan Maru, Nasuzan Maru, Kenichi Maru. Over 16,000 tons destroyed in one attack, but O'Kane wasn't done. Later that patrol, Tang encountered another convoy. Then another. By the time Tang headed back to Pearl Harbor on July 5th, she'd sunk 10 ships. It was the most successful single submarine patrol of the entire war, more than any other boat had achieved. O'Kane received his second Navy Cross. Tang received a Presidential Unit Citation. The submarine force was stunned. What was O'Kane doing differently? How was Tang so successful? Other commanders tried to figure it out. They studied Tang's patrol reports. They interviewed O'Kane. They talked to his crew. The answer was always the same: training, aggression, speed, trust. O'Kane trained his crew harder than anyone. He attacked more aggressively than anyone. He moved faster than anyone. And he trusted his crew completely. Those 4 factors made Tang unstoppable. Tang's 4th patrol went to Japanese home waters. Off the coast of Honshu, the enemy's front doorstep. From July 31 to September 3, 1944, Tang hunted in the most dangerous waters imaginable. Every ship was a potential threat. Every patrol plane was hunting submarines. Every harbor had escorts ready to attack. O'Kane operated Tang with calculated daring. He attacked when opportunities presented. He evaded when necessary. He sank 7 more ships, used every torpedo, came home empty. By September 1944, Richard O'Kane was the most successful submarine commander in the Pacific. 4 patrols, 27 ships sunk, over 90,000 tons destroyed, 3 Navy crosses, a Presidential Unit citation. Tang was the hottest boat in the submarine force. Every officer wanted to serve under O'Kane. Every enlisted man wanted to be part of Tang's crew. They were legends. But O'Kane was exhausted. 4 war patrols in 9 months, constant combat, relentless pressure. He'd lost weight, wasn't sleeping well. The qualms, stress was showing. His superiors suggested he take a break. Rest. Let another officer take Tang on her next patrol. O'Kane refused. Tang was his boat, his crew, his responsibility. He would command her 5th patrol. Then maybe he'd rest. Maybe. The 5th patrol was supposed to be routine. Taiwan Strait, intercept Japanese shipping, standard mission. O'Kane received orders to join a wolf pack with 3 other submarines. Commander John Coy would lead the group. Coordinated attacks, mutual support, safety in numbers. O'Kane declined. He'd operated alone on every patrol. He trusted himself and his crew. He didn't need other boats slowing him down. He took Tang into the strait alone. Tang departed Pearl Harbor on September 24, 1944. After refueling at Midway Island, she headed for the Taiwan Strait. The waters were known to be heavily mined and patrolled. On October 10th, Tang sank 2 cargo ships. On October 23rd, Tang found a convoy of 3 tankers, 2 transports, 1 freighter, and numerous escorts. It was night. O'Kane brought Tang to the surface and charged straight into the middle of the formation. At close range, O'Kane couldn't miss. Tang fired 8 torpedoes in rapid succession. 2 into the nearest tanker, 2 into a transport, 2 into another tanker, 2 into a freighter. All 8 hit. Explosions ripped through the convoy. Ships burst into flames. 1 tanker exploded so violently that the blast rocked Tang. O'Kane kept moving. He swung Tang through the convoy, dodging burning ships, staying ahead of the escorts. A Japanese destroyer charged straight at Tang. O'Kane saw it coming. He couldn't dive. No time. He turned Tang hard, maximum speed. The destroyer closed to ramming distance. Then it exploded. Either one of Tang's torpedoes caught it, or another Japanese ship hit it in the chaos. The destroyer broke apart and sank. Tang cleared the area at flank speed. Behind them, 5 ships were sinking. The convoy was parred, destroyed. O'Kane had fired 8 torpedoes and achieved complete success. It was one of the most spectacular submarine attacks in naval history. Tang moved north, away from the Taiwan Strait, into deeper water. O'Kane gave his crew time to rest. They'd been at battle stations for hours. Everyone was exhausted. But O'Kane believed the shallow waters along the Chinese coast would have more traffic. Japanese convoys would hug the shoreline. He was right. On the evening of October 24th, Tang's radar picked up a large convoy, multiple contacts, big ships, moving slowly along the coast. O'Kane studied the radar picture. This was exactly what Tang had come to find. O'Kane called his crew to battle stations. Tang would attack on the surface. One more time. They still had 2 torpedoes left. O'Kane intended to use them both. The problem wasn't supposed to happen. American submarines in 1944 used 2 main types of torpedoes, the Mark 14 steam torpedo and the Mark 18 electric torpedo. The Mark 14 was faster and had better range, but it left a visible wake that enemy lookouts could spot. The Mark 18 was quieter. No wake. Perfect for night surface attacks. O'Kane preferred the Mark 18. Tang's torpedo crews maintained their weapons obsessively. Every torpedo was tested. Every system was checked. But the Mark 18 had a flaw that wasn't widely known. Under certain conditions, the guidance system could malfunction. The torpedo would start a circular run, turning back toward the submarine that fired it. It had happened before. USS Tuliby had been sunk by her own torpedo on March 26, 1944, off Palau. Only one man survived from an 80-man crew. The Navy classified the incident. Most submarine commanders never learned the details. They knew circular runs were possible, but they thought it was rare. O'Kane knew about the risk. Every submarine commander did. Standard doctrine was simple. After firing torpedoes from the surface, crash dive immediately. Get deep. Get away from the launch point. But O'Kane didn't follow that doctrine. He stayed on the surface after attacks. He observed the results. He watched his torpedoes hit. He maintained control of the tactical situation. It was aggressive. It was dangerous. But it had worked on 5 war patrols. Tang had sunk 33 ships using O'Kane's tactics. Now those same tactics were about to kill him. The torpedo was 30 feet away, 20 feet. O'Kane couldn't look away. He watched it come. He knew every man on the bridge was watching it too. His lookouts, his quartermaster, his officer of the deck. All of them seeing their death approach at 46 miles per hour. All of them knowing there was no escape. The Mark 18 struck Tang's aft torpedo room. 570 pounds of Torpex explosive detonated against the hull. The explosion was massive. A column of water shot 50 feet into the air. The blast, waves swept across Tang's deck. Everything aft of the conning tower disintegrated. The torpedo room, the after battery, the crew spaces, the engine rooms, the maneuvering room, all gone in an instant. The 9 men on Tang's bridge were thrown into the water. O'Kane felt himself lifted and hurled sideways. He hit the ocean hard. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. He went under. Salt water filled his mouth and nose. He surfaced, gasping, choking. Around him in the darkness he could hear others, men calling out, men swimming, men drowning. Tang was right there, maybe 50 feet away. Her stern was already under water. Her bow was rising. The submarine was sinking fast. In the forward torpedo room, 30 men were still alive. They heard the explosion. Felt the shock. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in. The intercom was dead. The men didn't know what had happened. Some thought Tang had been depth-charged. Others thought they'd been torpedoed. Chief Torpedoman's Mate William Leibold took charge. He ordered all hatches sealed. He checked for flooding. The forward compartments were intact, but the entire aft section of the submarine was gone. There was no communication with anyone beyond the control room. Leibold realized they were alone, trapped. The only way out was up. Tang settled to the bottom, 180 feet down. The forward compartments had enough buoyancy to keep the bow elevated slightly, but the stern was planted in the mud. The boat was at a slight angle. Inside, the 30 survivors gathered in the forward torpedo room. It was the strongest compartment, the one most likely to withstand the pressure. Leibold organized the men. They began burning classified documents. Code books, cipher materials, patrol logs. Everything that could give the Japanese intelligence had to be destroyed. The men worked methodically. They knew what was coming. Either they would escape or they would die here. But they wouldn't give the enemy any advantage. O'Kane treaded water in the darkness. He'd lost his binoculars in the fall. His Kapok life jacket kept him afloat. Around him, he could see other heads bobbing in the waves. He counted. 3 others from the bridge. Lieutenant Lawrence Savadkin, the officer of the deck. Floyd Caverly, the lookout. Hayes Trucker, the helmsman. They were all alive. 4 men out of 9. O'Kane didn't know what happened to the other 5, dead from the explosion, or drowned, or unconscious somewhere in the dark water. They swam toward each other, stayed together. The sea was calm but cold. O'Kane knew they had maybe 6 or 8 hours before hypothermia set in. After that, they would die regardless of whether anyone found them. Above them, Tang was gone. The submarine had taken less than a minute to sink completely. All that remained was debris. floating wreckage, oil slicks, and somewhere underneath, 78 men, dead or dying. On the seabed, Tang's surviving crew faced their own battle. The depth was 180 feet. Well within the range of the Momsen lung, the emergency escape device every submariner carried. The Momsen lung was essentially a rubber breathing bag with a mouthpiece and nose clip. A man could fill it with air from the submarine's pressurized atmosphere, then ascend slowly, exhaling continuously to avoid lung damage from expanding air. The device had been tested extensively, but it had never been used successfully in actual combat. Most submariners didn't trust it. They'd heard stories of men whose lungs ruptured during ascent, men who drowned in the escape trunk. The Momsen lung was supposed to work, but nobody really knew if it would. Chief Leibold knew they had to try. The alternative was staying inside Tang until the air ran out. A slow death from carbon dioxide poisoning. Leibold had been a submariner for 12 years. He'd trained on the Momsen lung. He knew the procedures. But knowing and doing were different things. He gathered the men, explained the plan. They would escape through the forward torpedo room escape trunk. The trunk could hold maybe 3 men maximum. They'd flood it, equalize pressure, then open the hatch to the sea. Each man would swim up alone, no buddy system, no safety line. Just swim toward the surface and pray the Momsen lung worked. Then the Japanese arrived, patrol boats overhead, hunting for survivors, hunting for wreckage, trying to confirm the submarine kill. The patrol boats dropped depth charges. Not many, just a few, probably to make sure Tang was dead. The charges exploded close enough to shake the hull. In the torpedo room, paint blistered on the bulkheads from the shock. The concussion jarred equipment loose. A fire started in the forward battery. Electrical fire, toxic smoke. The men fought it with extinguishers, got it under control, but the air was getting worse. They had to leave. Now, at 0600 hours, 13 men began their escape attempt. They entered the escape trunk in groups of 3, flooded the chamber, equalized pressure. Their ears screamed from the pressure change, opened the hatch. The sea rushed in, black and cold. The men pushed off, one by one, swimming upward through the darkness. The Momsen lung functioned. They exhaled continuously, rose toward the surface. Some made it, others didn't. Their lungs ruptured. They lost consciousness. They drowned 10 feet from the surface. Of 13 men who left Tang, only 5 survived to reach the surface. O'Kane had been in the water for 8 hours. The sun was rising. He was barely conscious. Hypothermia was setting in. His body temperature was dropping. His thinking was confused. He didn't see the Japanese patrol boat until it was right next to him. Sailors leaned over the rail, called out in Japanese, threw a line. O'Kane grabbed it. He didn't have the strength to climb. They hauled him aboard like a fish, laid him on the deck. He looked up at Japanese faces, angry faces. They knew who he was. They knew what Tang had done. The beating started immediately. Fists, boots, rifle butts. The Japanese sailors were brutal. They kicked O'Kane repeatedly, struck him in the face, in the ribs, in the back. He couldn't defend himself. He was too weak, too cold. He just curled up and took it, tried to protect his head, tried to stay conscious. Around him on the deck, he saw other Americans. Tang survivors. They were being beaten too. The Japanese were furious. Tang had sunk dozens of their ships, killed hundreds of their sailors. Now they had the survivors, and they were taking revenge. In total, 9 Tang crew members survived. O'Kane. 3 others from the bridge. 5 who escaped from the forward torpedo room. 9 out of 87. 78 men dead. The most successful submarine in American naval history was gone, sunk by her own weapon. It was an ending nobody had imagined. Tang was supposed to come home victorious, return to Pearl Harbor, refit, go back to war. Instead, she was on the bottom of the Taiwan Strait, a tomb for 78 submariners. The Japanese took the survivors ashore, first to a local military facility, then to Ofuna, a secret interrogation camp outside Yokohama. Ofuna was run by the Japanese Navy. It was not registered with the International Red Cross. It officially didn't exist. No prisoner records. No Geneva Convention protections. No oversight. The camp was designed specifically for high-value prisoners, submarine commanders, pilots, intelligence officers, men who had information the Japanese wanted. The interrogation methods were systematic and brutal. O'Kane was interrogated for days. The questions were always the same. How deep can American submarines dive? What is their maximum operating depth? How do your fire control systems work? What are your torpedoes' technical specifications? O'Kane gave nothing. Name, rank, serial number. That was all. Nothing else. The interrogators beat him, withheld food, denied water, kept him in stress positions for hours. It didn't matter. O'Kane refused to cooperate. He'd commanded the most successful submarine in the Navy. He'd sunk 33 Japanese ships. He wasn't going to help the enemy kill more Americans by revealing submarine secrets. The other Tang survivors were treated the same way. All 9 men were questioned repeatedly. The Japanese were particularly interested in the submarine's diving capacity. Japanese submarines couldn't dive as deep as American boats. The enemy wanted to know why. What technology did the Americans have? The Tang survivors said nothing. They endured the beatings, the starvation, the psychological torture. They stuck together, supported each other, refused to break. Ofuna was nicknamed the torture farm by the prisoners who survived it. The camp held about 120 men at any given time. Submariners, pilots, high-value targets all. The guards were deliberately cruel. Beatings were daily. Food was minimal, 1 meal a day, maybe 600 calories. Men lost weight rapidly. Diseases spread. Dysentery, beriberi, infections. Medical care was non-existent. If a prisoner got sick, he either recovered on his own or died. The Japanese didn't care which. O'Kane watched other prisoners die. Saw men waste away from starvation. Saw men beaten until they couldn't stand. Saw men lose hope and give up. But he didn't give up. He'd survived Tang's sinking. He'd survived 8 hours in the ocean. He could survive this. He focused on staying alive, one day at a time. He memorized details, guard rotations, camp layout, prisoner locations. He didn't know if the information would ever be useful, but it gave him something to focus on, something to keep his mind sharp. In late 1944, O'Kane and several other Tang survivors were transferred to Omori prisoner of war camp. Omori was different from Ofuna. It was a legitimate POW camp, registered with the International Red Cross. But legitimate didn't mean humane. Omori was known throughout the Japanese prison system as punishment camp. The worst prisoners were sent there, the most troublesome, the most valuable, the ones the Japanese wanted to break completely. Omori was built on an artificial island in Tokyo Bay, connected to the mainland by a bamboo bridge. About 600 prisoners lived there. Conditions were deteriorating by 1945. Food supplies were shrinking. The guards were becoming more brutal. Air raids by American B-29s were constant. The guards blamed the prisoners for the bombing. The beatings intensified. One guard stood out, Corporal Mutsuhiro Watanabe. The prisoners called him the Bird. He was the camp's disciplinary officer. The Bird was a sadist. He took pleasure in inflicting pain. He would single out individual prisoners and beat them repeatedly. He was particularly interested in high-value prisoners, officers, pilots, submarine commanders. The Bird wanted to destroy their pride. O'Kane became one of the Bird's targets. Watanabe knew O'Kane's record, knew about the ships Tang had sunk. The Bird made it his mission to break O'Kane. He called O'Kane #1 prisoner, beat him every day, forced him to do extra labor, denied him food, humiliated him in front of other prisoners. The Bird wanted O'Kane to beg, to cry, to break down, to show weakness. O'Kane refused. He took the beatings without complaint, never showed emotion, never gave the bird the satisfaction. It made the bird angrier, made the beatings worse, but O'Kane wouldn't break. The other Tang survivors watched O'Kane, saw how he handled the torture, saw his strength. It gave them strength too. If their commander could survive this, they could survive too. They stuck together, helped each other, shared food when they had any. The Japanese tried to break them individually. But the men of Tang remained a crew, even in a prison camp, even facing death every day. The war was ending. Everyone knew it. American bombers flew over Omori constantly. By August 1945, Japan was collapsing. The atomic bombs had fallen. Hiroshima on August 6. Nagasaki on August 9. The Soviet Union had entered the war. Japanese cities were burning. On August 15, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. The guards at Omori heard the broadcast. They didn't tell the prisoners immediately. But the prisoners knew something had changed. The guards were different, less aggressive, more nervous. On August 29, American forces arrived at Omori. Landing craft came across Tokyo Bay, Marines and sailors with weapons ready. The Japanese guards surrendered without fighting. The prisoners were free. O'Kane had been a prisoner for 10 months. He'd lost over 50 pounds. He was skeletal, covered in bruises, sick with dysentery, but he was alive. All 9 Tang survivors were alive. They'd made it through Ofuna, through Omori, through torture and starvation and disease. They were going home. The Navy debriefed O'Kane extensively. They wanted every detail about Tang's final patrol, about the circular run, about the sinking, about the escape attempt. O'Kane reconstructed everything from memory. His patrol logs had gone down with Tang. He had no documents, no notes, just his memory and the memories of the other survivors. Together, they pieced together Tang's final hours. The Navy investigated the torpedo failure. They examined the Mark 18's design. They reviewed previous circular run incidents. They concluded that the torpedo's gyroscope system had a fundamental flaw. Under certain conditions, usually involving surface launches at high speeds, the gyroscope could tumble. When that happened, the torpedo's steering went haywire. It could turn in any direction, including back toward its launch point. The flaw was rare, but it was real, and it was deadly. The Navy also reviewed Tang's combat record. O'Kane had officially been credited with sinking 24 ships during Tang's 5 patrols. But the evidence suggested more. After the war, American researchers gained access to Japanese naval records, shipping logs, convoy records, loss reports. They cross-referenced American claims with Japanese losses. The results were extraordinary. Tang had actually sunk 33 ships, not 24, 33. Total tonnage 116,454 tons. It was the highest total for any American submarine in the entire war, both in number of ships sunk and in total tonnage. Tang was number 1, and Richard O'Kane was the most successful submarine commander in United States naval history. On March 27, 1946, President Harry Truman presented O'Kane with the Medal of Honor. The ceremony was at the White House. O'Kane stood on the lawn in full-dress uniform. Truman read the citation aloud. It described Tang's actions on October 23 and 24, 1944, how O'Kane had boldly maneuvered on the surface into the midst of heavily escorted convoys, how he'd stood in a fusillade of bullets and shells from all directions, how he'd launched smashing hits on 3 tankers, how he'd been boxed in by blazing tankers, a freighter, a transport, and several destroyers, how he'd charged the enemy at high speed, exploding a tanker in a burst of flame, smashing a transport dead in the water, and blasting a destroyer, how he'd expended his last 2 torpedoes into the remnants of a once powerful convoy before his own ship went down. The citation called it conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. O'Kane also received 3 Navy Crosses and 3 Silver Stars, 7 of the highest American military decorations for valor in combat. It was an extraordinary collection of awards. But O'Kane didn't talk about the medals much. When people asked about them, he changed the subject, talked about his crew instead. The men of Tang, the 78 who didn't come home, the 9 who survived, the training they'd endured, the battles they'd fought, the price they'd paid. O'Kane stayed in the Navy. He commanded submarine tender Peleus in the Pacific Reserve Fleet. He testified at war crimes trials in Tokyo. His testimony helped convict several Japanese officers who'd committed atrocities against prisoners. The camp commandant at Ofuna was sentenced to 25 years hard labor. Watanabe, the bird from Omori, was never captured. He disappeared after the war and went into hiding. The Americans hunted him for years, but never found him. Watanabe eventually resurfaced in the 1950s, living under his own name in Japan. By then, the war crimes trials were over. He was never prosecuted. O'Kane served as executive officer of submarine tender Nereus. He commanded Submarine Division 32. He attended the Armed Forces Staff College from 1950 to 1951. He was assigned to the submarine school in New London, Connecticut, first as an instructor, then as officer in charge. In July 1953, he was promoted to captain. He commanded submarine tender Sperry. In June 1954, he took command of Submarine Squadron 7. He studied at the Naval War College from 1955 to 1956. He served on the Ship Characteristics Board in Washington. In July 1957, at age 46, Richard O'Kane retired from the United States Navy. He was promoted to Rear Admiral on the retired list. O'Kane spent his retirement in California. In 1977, he published Clear the Bridge, a memoir of Tang's war patrols. The book was written from memory, but O'Kane's memory was precise. He described each patrol in detail, the attacks, the tactics, the training, the crew, the successes, and the failures. Clear the Bridge became a classic of submarine literature. Captain Edward Beach himself, submarine commander and author of Run Silent, Run Deep, wrote the introduction. Beach said there was no doubt Tang was the best submarine of the war. He wondered what Tang had that other boats didn't. O'Kane's book answered that question: aggressive leadership, relentless training, calculated risk-taking, absolute trust between commander and crew. In 1987, O'Kane published Wahoo, a second memoir about his time as executive officer under Dudley Morton. The book described how Morton had revolutionized submarine tactics, how he'd reversed traditional roles by letting O'Kane man the periscope during attacks, how he'd given O'Kane the freedom to develop his skills, how he'd trained O'Kane to be the commander he eventually became. Wahoo was Morton's submarine, but it was also O'Kane's training ground. Everything O'Kane learned from Morton, he applied to Tang: the aggressive tactics, the night surface attacks, the relentless drilling, the trust in subordinates. Morton died when Wahoo was sunk, but his methods lived on through O'Kane. Throughout his retirement, O'Kane stayed connected to the submarine community. He attended reunions, spoke at submarine school graduations, mentored young officers. His message was always the same: train hard, trust your crew, be aggressive, but calculated. Take risks but minimize them through preparation. Know your equipment, drill until perfection is automatic. Lead from the front. Never ask your men to do something you wouldn't do yourself. The 9 Tang survivors stayed in touch. They held reunions every year, remembered the men who died, talked about the patrols, the attacks, the training, the sinking, the imprisonment. They were bound together by what they'd experienced. No one else could understand what they'd been through. The terror of the circular run, the explosion, the sinking, the men trapped inside, the beatings at Japanese hands, the starvation, the torture, the survival. They'd lived through something that most men couldn't imagine. Richard O'Kane died on February 16, 1994, at his home in Sebastopol, California. He was 83 years old. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His grave is marked with his rank, Rear Admiral, his dates of service, and the Medal of Honor designation. Hundreds of people attended the funeral. Submariners, veterans, family members, men who'd served with him, men who'd been inspired by him. Everyone who knew him understood they were saying goodbye to a legend. In 1999, the Navy commissioned USS O'Kane, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. The ship was named in his honor. At the commissioning ceremony, surviving Tang crew members were present. They were old men by then, in their 70s and 80s. But they stood at attention as O'Kane's widow christened the ship. O'Kane had achieved something no other submarine commander had matched. 33 ships sunk, the highest total in American naval history, a record that still stands. The O'Kane cribbage board became a submarine force tradition. The original board, used by Morton and O'Kane on Wahoo, was lost when Tang sank. The board had been legendary. Morton had dealt O'Kane a perfect 29 hand during a patrol. That same night, Wahoo sank 2 freighters. A few days later, Morton dealt O'Kane a 28-point hand. Wahoo sank 3 more ships. The crew believed the board was lucky. When O'Kane took command of Tang, he brought the tradition with him. In 1957, the crew of a new submarine, also named Tang, gave O'Kane a replacement cribbage board to honor the original. After O'Kane died in 1994, that board was given to the oldest fast attack submarine in the United States Pacific Fleet. When that submarine decommissions, the board transfers to the next oldest boat. It's carried in the wardroom. Officers play cribbage on it. The tradition continues. Every submariner who serves on the boat carrying O'Kane's board knows the story, knows about Wahoo and Tang, knows about Morton and O'Kane, knows about the 33 ships. The Medal of Honor, the circular run, the survival, the legend, Tang's wreck has never been found. It lies somewhere in the Taiwan Strait in 180 feet of water. The exact location was recorded in Tang's final position report, but that report was approximate. The Taiwan Strait is difficult to search. Political tensions between China and Taiwan limit access. Salvage operations are unlikely. Tang will probably remain there forever. A war grave for 78 men. The most successful submarine in American naval history, resting on the seafloor where she fell. O'Kane's tactics became standard doctrine in the submarine force. Night surface attacks, aggressive positioning, charging into the middle of convoys, using speed and surprise to overwhelm the enemy. These methods were controversial during the war. Some commanders thought O'Kane was too reckless, but the results spoke for themselves. Tang sank more ships than any other submarine. O'Kane's methods worked. After the war, the Navy studied his tactics extensively. They incorporated many of his techniques into submarine warfare doctrine. Training programs emphasized the principles O'Kane had demonstrated. Speed, aggression, precision, trust. Modern submarine commanders still study O'Kane's patrols as examples of effective submarine warfare. The story of Tang is taught at the Naval Academy, at submarine schools, at officer training programs. It's presented as a case study in leadership, tactics, and the price of innovation. O'Kane was a brilliant commander who pushed his crew to achieve the impossible. He sank 33 enemy ships in 9 months. He rescued 22 downed pilots under fire. He survived imprisonment and torture. He received the Medal of Honor and became the most decorated submarine commander in American history. But he also lost 78 men when his own torpedo turned against him. That loss haunted O'Kane for the rest of his life. In interviews during his retirement, O'Kane rarely talked about his awards or his record. He talked about the men instead. The crew of Tang, the crew of Wahoo, the men who'd trained with him, fought with him, and died with him. He remembered their names, where they were from, their jobs aboard the submarine, their personalities. O'Kane could recall details about men he'd served with 40 years earlier. He kept in touch with as many as he could, wrote letters, made phone calls, attended funerals. He never forgot that his success had been built on their skill and sacrifice. That's how exceptional leadership actually works in war. Not through grand strategies or perfect plans, but through men who push themselves and their teams beyond what anyone thought possible. O'Kane didn't invent submarine warfare, but he perfected it. He learned from Dudley Morton on Wahoo. He adapted those lessons to Tang. He trained his crew harder than anyone else. He drilled them until they could execute attacks with split-second precision. He took risks that other commanders avoided. He achieved results that seemed impossible, and when it all came crashing down, when his own weapon destroyed his submarine, he survived. He endured imprisonment. He came home. He continued serving. He mentored the next generation. He passed on the lessons he'd learned, the tactics that worked, the training methods that produced results, the leadership principles that made ordinary men extraordinary. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania. From veterans to history enthusiasts, you're part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.